Welcome to Groove Tracks. I'm Kurt.
And I'm Tim. Groove Tracks are short, quick dives into a single concept, a paper, or a unique idea. So, what do we have on the docket for today, Kurt?
You're going to love this, Tim, because it's right in our wheelhouse. It's about incentives and their long-term impact on motivation.
Oh, you know I'm going to love that.
Okay. So, we're going to explore the research paper by Indranil Goswami and Oleg Urmisky with the lovely title of The Dynamic Effect of Incentives on Post-Reward Task Engagement.
Whew.
However, for our listeners, there is another more readable paper by Oleg with the more aptly named title of Short-Term Rewards Don't Sap Long-Term Motivation that we will also be pulling from.
Okay, good. Let's begin with a little background on this. For many years, the general consensus by many researchers and practitioners was that providing people with short-term extrinsic rewards sapped their long-term motivation. This was originally identified by DC and Ryan in some groundbreaking studies in the 1970s and 80s. And their research suggested that when you give people, oftentimes kids, a reward for doing something that they enjoyed, they did less of that activity immediately after removing the reward. This effect was seen in a number of different studies.
And this was labeled the over-justification effect by Lepper-Green and Nisbet. The concept can be boiled down to this idea that our brains are always trying to figure out why we're doing something. And that if we get paid to do something, our brains think that we must be being bribed to do that activity, and therefore must not like it as much as we might have believed before.
So DC and Ryan, along with Kestner, also explained this decreased engagement following a reward as a decrease in our sense of autonomy. That by being paid to do something, people felt they were lacking autonomy and thus decreased the intrinsic motivation to do that activity after receiving a reward for doing it. They felt that this decrease in the feeling of autonomy for doing the reward would lead to long-term change in how the activity was viewed and the motivation to engage in it.
However, there were always some cracks in these findings. So in 1999, Eisenberger, Pierce, and Cameron did a meta-analysis that showed that earning extrinsic rewards could lead to greater feelings of self-determination and increased intrinsic motivation depending on how the reward was earned. If you only had to meet vague performance measures to earn the award, then yes, your subsequent intrinsic motivation was reduced. However, if you had to meet strict performance levels or beat others in order to earn that award, their research found that in those situations, self-determination and intrinsic motivation were flat and oftentimes might even see an increase.
Yeah, so even DC, Ryan, and Kestner showed that verbal rewards and unexpected rewards had no subsequent post-reward effect on behavior. And another crack in this post-reward performance decline argument was that real-world companies, those that were engaged in highly competitive markets, they continued to use and increase the use of incentives with their salespeople. Surely, if rewards caused a performance decline, they would have gotten rid of those costly incentives quickly. But that was not the case.
Great points, Tim. So let's look at the study by Goswami and Urmisky. What's it say?
Okay, this is a cool study that was published in 2018. Basically, what they did was look at behaviors over a longer period of time to see what happened when they introduced an extrinsic reward and what happened after they removed that extrinsic reward.
So the study was set up where 90 participants were given the opportunity to choose between two activities. One of those activities was solving a math problem, and the other was watching a video of fun advertisements from around the world. Now, I know which one I would pick, but that's a whole separate conversation, right? The activities both took 30 seconds.
The fun part of this is that they asked the question 30 times. Now, there was first a baseline period of 8 trials. Then, half the group was given a reward option, where if they solved the cognitive math test, they earned additional bonus money of 5 cents for each correct answer. And this was for trials 9 through 18. Finally, there was the post-reward period, which were trials 19 through 30, where the rewards were taken away completely.
And drumroll please, the results showed that, as expected, when the reward was offered, there was a huge spike in people choosing the math problem over watching the advertisements. Of course, participants could earn more money that way, even if it only was 5 cents for each correct answer. And as predicted, when that incentive was removed in Trial 19, there was a significant decrease in people choosing the math problem. But here is the key finding, Tim, that by trial number 21, there was no difference between the control group and the reward group in what they chose. The initial drop in picking the math problems after the reward was removed all but disappeared.
The reduction in engagement was only momentary. In fact, they found that there was even a slight increase in the reward group people choosing the math problem over the baseline after trial 21.
All of this points to the idea that short-term rewards do not sap long-term motivation.
And that is significant implications for businesses and other organizations that use incentives. For a long time, there has been concern that using incentives could ultimately decrease motivation, but we can be reassured that will not likely happen.
And therefore, we can be more confident in choosing short-term incentives to drive behavior change and performance improvements across a number of different areas. Of course, short-term incentives have been effectively used in sales forever, but we could potentially use them in learning, other HR initiatives. Or what about using incentives on a more personal basis for getting you to eat healthier or exercise more, or for educators to encourage kids to get better grades? The opportunities, Tim, the opportunities are out there.
Yes, they are. And we encourage you to rethink using incentives and maybe even incent yourself to go out and find your groove.